and welcome to Kent Tonight Live on KMTV. I'm Megan Shaw and here are your top stories on Wednesday the 14th of January. The chaos continues. Schools closed and farmers furious as thousands in Kent still without water.
It's not just a case of closing schools, it really is. There's a knock-on effect to everything. It's a big decision.
Is this the final chapter for Kent's oldest library? Kent County Council vote to proceed with sale of historic Folkestone building.
If Reform had pulled their finger out and partnered with the community to obtain grants to make this building usable again, we would not be in this position.
And left at checkout, an artist from Gravesend has spent 3 years collecting shopping lists for an exhibition.
I must have found that list and thought, oh, that could be interesting sometime. And then I must have gone back to a supermarket and found another, and it just kept happening. Now I've got 1,000.
Our top story tonight. Thousands are still without water across Kent as supplies are beginning to return to villages outside Maidstone. The South East water outages have forced schools to close, with residents furious about the situation. The water company has apologised and they say services are returning gradually. Finn McDermott was speaking to those affected in Leeds.
Around Maidstone is plenty of rolling countryside, and for villages in that area they've had several days of water loss, but it seems that supply is now returning. Despite this, it hasn't been an easy transition. Schools have still had to close, restaurants have shut their doors, and people living in villages like Kingswood and Leeds have felt that their lives have almost been on pause.
Yeah, we've had to go to Headcorn Aerodrome, which is 28 miles round trip from here, 3 times now, and very limited supply from there, not enough to shower, just enough to drink.
But it's something needs to go. I mean, like I said, I want too bad. I've got 2 cars, I've got a family, but some poor pensioner on his own or her own, how they've managed, I don't know.
And while there is a sense of relief now that they are getting their water back, there's also anger, frustration and confusion. Some are angry at the very top bosses of these companies, while others are frustrated with the lack of communication. While households have been feeling the strain, schools in the area have also been particularly affected. The Aspire Foundation runs 4 primary schools: Kingswood, Leeds and Broomfield, Oldcombe and Platts Heath. Of those 4, 2 were closed today from a lack of water.
There's no hot lunches today because Kingswood cook for Leeds and Broomfield, Oldcombe cooks for Platts Heath, our other school, and so none of the 4 schools across the Federation have got hot lunches today. Children are having to go back to doing things online, so for their well-being as well, it's really, really important. We've got children who come in taxis, so there's lots of things that have been disrupted. It's not just a case of opening or closing a school.
For children in the catchment area that were affected, some were taught at the open schools while others had online learning. Now, we asked South East Water for an updated statement around these several villages, including Kingswood, and we were provided with a statement where they highlighted East Grinstead, Tunbridge Wells and where bottled water stations are, not mentioning the villages or Maidstone specifically. They said in total, supplies have been restored to 16,000 properties across Kent and Sussex during the past 24 hours. We're very sorry to all our customers who have been affected. We know and understand how difficult going without water for such a long period of time is, and how difficult it makes everyday life. While the water crisis is now winding down with properties finding their taps working properly again, the story is far from over. Questions will still be raised about the communication, how the issues happened in the first place, and what will be done to ensure that the county, especially these rural areas like Kingswood and Leeds, will have the basic necessity that is water. Finn McDermott for KMTV in Leeds and Kingswood.
And the water supply shortage has not only caused schools to shut down, but it's also spurred anger across the political spectrum, with Sir Keir Starmer weighing in during the Prime Minister's questions earlier today. And our reporter, Finn McDermott, joins me in the studio now to tell us more. So, Finn, can you tell us a bit more about what's said during these PMQs?
Absolutely. So it all started when Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, emphasised how the supply shortage re-emerged in more areas than just Tunbridge Wells, as that was what occurred in 2025 from late November to mid to early December. He touched on how pensioners, families, homes and businesses had been without water since Saturday and said water bosses stand accused of misleading Parliament over and over again. So quite damning words there. Let's hear a little bit of what Ed Davey had to say.
Last month, I asked the Prime Minister to get a grip of South East Water, who'd left thousands of people in Royal Tunbridge Wells without water. Now it's happened again, not only in Tunbridge Wells, but in East Grinstead, Burgess Hill, Haywards Heath, and other parts of Kent and Sussex. Families, pensioners, schools, care homes, businesses without any water since Saturday. And the water company bosses involved now stand accused of misleading Parliament over their failures. Mr. Speaker, South East Water keeps failing its customers over and over again. So will the government immediately strip them of their licence?
Keir Starmer responded to that, calling it totally unacceptable, and say that ministers have chaired some emergency committee meetings to hold the company to account. We can hear what the Prime Minister said in response to Ed Davey.
Can I thank him for raising this, because the situation is clearly totally unacceptable. He will want to know that ministers have chaired daily emergency meetings to hold the company to account, to deliver on the change that's urgently needed at the moment in all the areas that he mentioned. We've also doubled the compensation rates for individuals and businesses. And we're absolutely clear the company must urgently invest in infrastructure, and we'll publish the Water White Paper in due course. But we are holding those daily meetings to hold this company to account.
So Finn, what happens next?
Well, the latest update we have is the Environment Secretary Emma Reynolds says the government will ask its regulator Ofwat to review the licence for South East Water. It could be put into an administrative regime. It could have a penalty to its overheads. At this point, we just don't yet know. On this, South East Water, their latest, they've said, is they're continuing to use tankers to pump, especially in priority areas, and they apologise to all the affected customers who are still suffering from a lack of water. And it wasn't just schools as well that have been affected. Our reporter Kristen Hawthorne has been speaking to livestock farmers here in the county about how the water has been affecting them and their animals.
The ongoing water crisis across the county is of course affecting many areas of people's lives. But it's not only people who are being affected, but livestock as well, which can't rely on bottled water. Due to last year's dry summer, the Horlands farm installed rainwater tanks to build supply for the animals.
So we've got cattle, sheep and horses on the farm, and they're obviously the cattle are in sheds for the winter, horses are in overnight and the sheep are out in the fields, but we need more water in the winter than we would do in the summer, and we've been off yesterday and today. They were saying that we were back on when we weren't. We've just had zero since it was 8:30 the evening before yesterday. It went off and it's not been back on, so. Yeah, I mean, we thought they might put some provision in for livestock. They haven't done anything, and obviously you can't really water livestock with 2-litre bottles. So if we didn't have these tanks, we'd be really worried, yeah. So we've connected this up to our rainwater harvesting, comes up the pipe here and floats in there. So these guys are on rainwater today.
At the Horlands farm, the cows were able to get their supply of water through the use of rainfall collecting tanks. But for calves, it's different, as those systems just do not work.
So the milk machine relies on a high pressure, on high pressure with to effectively run, and therefore, without the high pressure, the machine won't work, and therefore won't supply milk to the calves. I asked for our line to be a high welfare line. That didn't come to fruition, and therefore, you know, we've been having to make up milk. They've turned it on for an hour at a time to help, but it hasn't really helped because they need it 24/7. You know. They've said that they were going to come up and supply tankers and inject it into our line, but again, they said they're too busy and haven't got enough tankers. So,
since I left the farm in Tunbridge Wells, Nick called me to say that one of the calves has died from dehydration, with others being checked over throughout the evening. South East Water have said that we are very sorry to all our customers who've been affected. We know and understand how difficult going without water for such a long period of time is, and how difficult it makes everyday life. We are continuing to use 26 tankers to pump water directly into our network to increase the amount of water available in the affected areas. And our leak repair teams are working around the clock to fix the leaks and bursts across Kent and Sussex, with extra resources available to help carry out repairs. As the water begins to trickle back in across the county, many are left asking why this happened, and whether lessons will be learned to prevent it happening again. Kristen Hawthorne, KMTV.
Now, a man in his 40s has been confirmed dead after a crash involving a car and a water tanker. A silver Vauxhall Mariva travelling south on the A2070 collided with a purple Volvo tanker heading the opposite way. Paramedics and firefighters were called to the scene following the crash at 3:15 p.m. yesterday. The road was shut and remained closed this morning, but rail services impacted yesterday have now resumed. The car driver was pronounced dead at the scene and his next of kin has been informed. The tanker driver was taken to a local hospital where he was treated for injuries. Next, residents in Willsborough were woken by shouting in the early hours after a house fire broke out in the Ashford suburb. The road was shut in both directions, from Wild Willow Close to Cudworth Road, as 7 fire engines and a fire-height vehicle were called to the scene. Firefighters wearing breathing apparatus used hose reel jets to put the flames out and access water from hydrants. Due to the amount of water needed, some residents in the area may have had low pressure this morning. 2 people were taken into the care of paramedics after suffering the effects of smoke inhalation. The cause of the fire is not yet known. Now it's time for a short break, but coming up we've got plenty more. We take a look at Kent County Council's decision to auction Kent's oldest library in Folkestone. All that and more coming to you after the break. We'll see you then. Hello and welcome back to Kent Tonight live on KMTV. Now, fury in Folkestone as Kent County Council's decided to proceed with the auction of Kent's oldest library in Folkestone this week. The Grade 2 listed building on Grace Hill has been closed since 2022 due to health and safety issues. But while the community want the library to be reimagined as a community asset, there are significant concerns around the running costs of keeping the building. And Chloe Brewster went to the former library to see its condition for herself.
Folkestone Library is the oldest surviving purpose-built library in Kent. Opened in 1888, it once held one of the most extensive local heritage archives in the county.
Grace Hill has been Folkestone's library for over 140 years. It was donated to the town about 1888 and has been its library and its museum and the place of registry of births for many of the years since.
But since it was closed in 2022 due to water issues, it has sat vacant. In yesterday's Growth, Environment and Transport Committee, councillors voted on whether they should auction the building off.
I thought the meeting was terrible, and I think that the administration completely ignored the views of Folkestone that I was trying to put across.
Save Folkestone Library campaign, as well as Creative Folkestone, put forward plans to keep the library in place. But KCC say the plans are just not financially viable.
This door has been open for consultation and discussion with a lot of the community groups for certainly in the 8 months we've been here, and I believe beforehand with the previous administration. But it ought to be borne in mind that let's look at the positive of this. Folkestone hasn't had a proper library service for over 3 years now. And by putting this new library service into the Woolworths building, it's going to be getting a service that it hasn't had and it should have had.
But not everyone agrees enough has been done.
If Reform had pulled their finger out and partnered with the community to obtain grants to make this building usable again, we would not be in this position. I'm not saying that the KCC should put their hand in their pocket and pay for the refurbishments themselves. And I just think that what they need to do now is to row back and commit to work with the community and Creative Folkestone to allow funding bids to be made for that building. They can get on with the temporary provision works in the meantime, but KCC is saying, are absolutely clear that those works are for the temporary provision. What I'm talking about is doing the hard yards needed to get that building back up to scratch so that a proper long-term solution for Folkestone Library, for the Grace Hill Library, can be found. And that is what they have to get on and do.
While what the building ends up as isn't quite clear, people here will be hoping this isn't the last chapter for Grace Hill. Chloe Brewster for KMTV in Folkestone.
Now, plans to transform a roundabout, which has been an eyesore on the main route into a village for more than 2 decades, has been backed by residents. The junction on the A228 at Fen Corner is unpopular with villagers on the Hoo Peninsula due to its appearance and a perceived lack of maintenance. Nick Craddock, chairman of St Mary Hoo Parish Council, says the council has sufficient funds in its reserves to cover the full cost of the project if needed, but the intention is to reduce that cost through practical support rather than cash contributions. And Maisie Walker has the story.
The junction on the A228 at Fen Corner is unpopular with villagers on the Hoo Peninsula due to its appearance and perceived lack of maintenance.
Somebody coming in to visit us here on the peninsula, be it St Mary, Hoo, Grain or Hallows, the first thing they get to is that flipping roundabout. That's like the front door to the eastern end of the peninsula. It's the only way in and out. If we leave it as it is, you come round the corner that you just came round, the first thing you're going to see is a dirty great big lump of concrete in the road and a load of new houses staring at you. If we plant that roundabout, then the first thing you're going to see is going to be welcoming. It's not going to be brutal in your face. Here we are.
The parish council estimates the core groundwork would be completed for about £3,000. This would cover removing the concrete and sub-base, disposing of the material and importing enough subsoil and topsoil to prepare the roundabout for planting and artwork. Mr Craddy says the parish council has sufficient funds in its reserves to cover the full cost of the project if needed, but the intention is to reduce that cost through practical support rather than cash contributions. He stresses the aim is not to secure funding from Medway Council, but to obtain permission. A Medway Council spokesperson said, we look into and respond to all petitions we receive, which may include looking into the matter further, considering the petition at a council meeting or holding a public meeting or consultation. The Parish Council hopes the project will soon turn the long criticised roundabout into a welcoming feature for the village. Maisie Walker for KMTV.
Now, with water concerns across the county over the last week, particularly for elderly or vulnerable people, the potential health risks of being without running water are becoming an increasing reality. So what can we do about it? And our health expert, Dr. Julian Spinks, joins us now. So, Julian, what's the health advice for those with water shortages in and around Kent?
I think you've got to prioritise how you use your water. Obviously, you're going to have a limited supply. The biggest priority is clean drinking water, so don't use up your water on other things. You can eke out and say, well, actually, I can make clothes last a day or two longer, so you're not using up for that. It is important for some people with health problems to have good access to water, and you're going to need it for washing hands before preparing food, as well as preparing the food. And obviously, when you go to the toilet, you need to wash your hands afterwards.
And why is it so important that people have access to running water?
Well, it goes without saying you need fresh water, clean water, which is safe to drink. And if you can't have that, yes, bottled water can partly replace that, but it is a problem. The other areas like washing and so on, if you can't wash your hands after going to the toilet, there's a risk of cross-contamination when you're making more food. As a professional, if we don't have water in a surgery, you more or less have to close because we can't do anything about it. And likewise with nurses and things going in. There are some people with chronic diseases are at greater risk. And in particular, people who need dialysis at home, they need both power and water to be present to be able to do that. And often they can't put it off for more than a day or so.
And so how can we prepare for this in the future, seeing as, unfortunately, it does seem to be a reality that so many people in Kent are facing?
It's worthwhile having a plan. And one of the things actually can be to have a water butt collecting water off your roof, which you can use for some things, clearly not for preparing food and other things. The second thing is to have a supply of fresh water still there to tide you over until you can get to a centre to be delivered. If you have chronic disease, then register as a priority customer, because that means you'll get water delivered, or hopefully you will, and also it may mean that you're a priority to get things back. And really just look at what you can do in the future. The biggest thing is we've got to have a regular supply of water, so it's the water companies that need to be doing something to make sure this doesn't happen to too many people.
I see. And so how can this impact, you mentioned people with chronic illnesses, but quickly, elderly people in particular, how can that impact them?
Well, for example, elderly people often get skin problems, and so they need to be able to wash to keep that sound. They need fresh water and things so that they can take medication and cook food healthily. So water is a basic need for life, same as breathing and other things. So if you're not getting your water, you're in trouble.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spinks. Now, don't forget you can keep up to date with all your latest stories across Kent by logging on to our website, kmtv.co.uk. There you'll find all our reports, including this one, about calls to bring back the Eurostar to Ashford International on the anniversary of continental services coming to the station.
It was an unusual birthday party for Ashford International, with no international trains actually stopping by for the celebrations. International services have not stopped in Kent since 2020 during the pandemic. This 30th anniversary event behind me is designed to build support amongst business leaders and politicians to try and bring those services back for good.
We have representatives from every part of Kent. We've got representatives from government. We've got representatives from the operators. We have all of the pieces of the puzzle that are here in this room today that can put Ashford back on the international rail map.
One group in attendance is Virgin, who now have the depot space needed to launch their own international services in the future. Their representatives didn't want to speak to us at the event, but they have previously said they're open to services stopping in the county if Ashford or Ebbsfleet International reopened. something that would require the help of the government and other partners to actually happen.
Following a Brexit, we have to have a border checks. So there need to be a working with French government. So that's the work we need from the government. Money, yes. Treasury, I had a conversation with Chancellor. So there's a commitment from the Treasury as well. We may need some investment here. So that's what the commitment is. And the government is fully committed to remove any barriers.
More than 82,000 people have called for the return of services, with those trying to bring services back saying it could inject millions of pounds into the local economy.
There is very significant demand. Our own studies show that there is a prospect of high-speed rail tripling between now and 2040. The other thing is, of course, we have the capacity available on the high-speed line. That capacity is available now. There's 50% of the line which is available.
Eurostar told us that their Kent stations will remain closed, but confidence appears to be building that international rail could soon be back on track for Kent. Ollie Leader in Ashford.
Well, it's time for a short break, but coming up, we've got plenty more. We'll be recapping all of today's headlines, including our top story about how thousands are still without water in Kent, although supplies are beginning to return to villages outside Maidstone. We'll also hear from the first neurodivergent Barbie. All that and more after the break. We'll catch you then. See you later. and welcome to Kent Tonight Live on KMTV. I'm Megan Shaw and here are your top stories on Wednesday the 14th of January. The chaos continues. Schools closed and farmers furious as thousands in Kent still without water.
It's not just a case of closing schools, it really is. There's a knock-on effect to everything. It's a big decision.
Is this the final chapter for Kent's oldest library? Kent County Council vote to proceed with sale of historic Folkestone building.
If Reform had pulled their finger out and partnered with the community to obtain grants to make this building usable again, we would not be in this position.
And left at checkout, an artist from Gravesend has spent 3 years collecting shopping lists for an exhibition.
I must have found that list and thought, oh, that could be interesting sometime. And then I must have gone back to a supermarket and found another, and it just kept happening. Now I've got 1,000.
And our top story tonight. Thousands are still without water across Kent as supplies are beginning to return to villages outside Maidstone. The South East water outages have forced schools to close, with residents furious about the situation. The water company has apologised and they say services are returning gradually. Finn McDermott was speaking to those affected in Leeds earlier.
Around Maidstone is plenty of rolling countryside, and for villagers in that area they've had several days of water loss, but it seems that supply is now returning. Despite this, it hasn't been an easy transition. Schools have still had to close, restaurants have shut their doors, and people living in villages like Kingswood and Leeds have felt that their lives have almost been on pause.
Yeah, we've had to go to Headcorn Aerodrome, which is 28 miles round trip from here, 3 times now, and very limited supply from there, not enough to shower, just enough to drink.
But it's something needs to go. I mean, like I said, I want too bad. I've got 2 cars, I've got a family, but some poor pensioner on his own or her own, how they've managed, I don't know.
And while there is a sense of relief now that they are getting their water back, there's also anger, frustration and confusion. Some are angry at the very top bosses of these companies, while others are frustrated with the lack of communication. While households have been feeling the strain, schools in the area have also been particularly affected. The Aspire Foundation runs 4 primary schools: Kingswood, Leeds and Broomfield, Oldcombe and Platts Heath. Of those 4, 2 were closed today from a lack of water.
There's no hot lunches today because Kingswood cook for Leeds and Broomfield, Oldcombe cooks for Platts Heath, our other school, and so none of the 4 schools across the Federation have got hot lunches today. Children are having to go back to doing things online, so for their well-being as well, it's really, really important. We've got children who come in taxis, so there's lots of things that have been disrupted. It's not just a case of opening or closing a school.
For children in the catchment area that were affected, some were taught at the open schools while others had online learning. Now, we asked South East Water for an updated statement around these several villages, including Kingswood, and we were provided with a statement where they highlighted East Grinstead, Tunbridge Wells and where bottled water stations are, not mentioning the villages or Maidstone specifically. They said in total, supplies have been restored to 16,000 properties across Kent and Sussex during the past 24 hours. We're very sorry to all our customers who have been affected. We know and understand how difficult going without water for such a long period of time is and how difficult it makes everyday life. While the water crisis is now winding down with properties finding their taps working properly again, the story is far from over. Questions will still be raised about the communication, how the issues happened in the first place, and what will be done to ensure that the county, especially these rural areas like Kingswood and Leeds, will have the basic necessity that is water. Finn McDermott for KMTV in Leeds and Kingswood.
Next, 3 councillors from across Kent have defected to Reform UK today, bolstering the growing number of politicians turning to the upstart party. Local representatives from Sevenoaks, Gravesham and Thanet have joined the party's ranks, but Conservatives in Kent remain convinced their fortunes are on the verge of turning around. And local democracy reporter Ollie Leader joins me on the sofa now. So, Ollie, tell us, who's been the latest to join Reform UK?
Meet the 3 musketeers. Oh, you have Councillor Barry Manners in the middle, as well as Councillor Dakota Dibben in Gravesham and Councillor Lawrence Ball in Sevenoaks. They have all become the latest members to join Nigel Farage's upstart right-wing party, challenging the Conservatives on that fringe of politics. Obviously, we saw them dominate the local elections at Kent County Council. Now we have 3 more district and borough councils at a lower tier authority also changing parties. This is not the first time this has happened here in Kent. This is just yet more defections. I spoke to Councillor Barry Manners, actually. He said that while people might be upset that he's changed party, it wasn't cost effective to have another by-election in Thanet during local government reorganisation.
I was elected because I have a reputation locally, I believe, for getting things done, for keeping the streets and the beaches clean, for getting trees planted, for improving biodiversity, for making sure the assets, the property assets like the sports pavilion, the sea shelters and so on are properly maintained, and being a voice for that to happen. I think party politics isn't that relevant. And I think when people make too much of party politics in local government, they're doing it because they're playing silly games.
And Ollie, tell us, what have other parties said then?
Well, I heard from the Thanet Conservatives. Barry Manor used to be a Conservative, then went independent. He's now part of Reform UK. The Conservative group leader, John Davis, did not hold back. Neither did Barry Manners for his part, but John Davis said that his party are loyal towards the Conservative cause at this point in time.
If people choose to be disloyal, then that's for them. But the Conservative Party is on a resurgence. Our policies are starting to come through and will be considered relevant. But on the other hand, knee-jerk reactions and opposition and arguing for the sake of it achieve nothing. We have to find consensus on the areas we can.
Well, there's been around 21 councils across the country that have defected. The question on people's minds, will there be any more? Well, we don't necessarily know that. We do know that Reform do have some popularity here in Kent and across the country in polling. We'll have to wait and see if that materialises in further defections.
Absolutely, something we will be following here at KMTV. Now, he might be just 17 years old, but Kent resident Connor Watts has been selected to represent England at the WKF European Karate Championships in Cyprus. However, with karate being largely self-funded sport here in England, Connor has started a GoFundMe to help cover the cost. And I spoke with him earlier to chat more about his coming competition. So, Connor, thank you so much for joining us here. So, first of all, can you just start by telling us about the WKF European Karate Championships?
So the championships are being held in Cyprus on the 6th till 8th of February. We're going to be out there for a week training and competing as a team.
Absolutely. And what is the process like to get to this level of competition? I imagine it's hours and hours and hours of training behind that there.
Yeah, so I started karate when I was 4 and I've loved it ever since. Like, I've trained on Mondays, Tuesdays, Fridays and Saturdays, like every week. And it's loads of hours put in, as well as England training on top of that. And yeah, it's just a lot of effort to get where I am.
And you also mentioned that karate is mainly self-funded. So what are the kind of challenges this brings?
Well, a lot of the competitions where you want to get better experience are normally abroad. And obviously that's a greater cost for you because you're fighting better fighters, but it's in very expensive places. So a lot of the time when you're fighting, you can only really get better if you're going to these big competitions.
I see, and you mentioned there you started at the age of 4. Hope you don't mind me saying you still look quite young. So can you tell us exactly how long you have been training for, and also what inspired you to start so young?
So when I was younger, I was a bit more shy, and my mum got me into it just to build my confidence. But once I properly got into it, I just loved it. Like, I couldn't stop.
I see. And how many has it been now that you've been practicing karate?
So it's been 12 years.
Wow, it's quite a long time. And for anyone out there who's maybe wanted to start their karate journey, maybe they're 4 or they're 40, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, just get stuck in, really. a lot of the time it can be quite intimidating to try something new or to like stay consistent with something. But as long as you stick to it, you're gonna get better and enjoy it more.
I see, and we've got this championship on the horizon, Connor. So after that, what's next? Is it time for a long rest, or have you got plenty more things to put your mind to?
Well, I'll be preparing for the next selections for World Championships, and hopefully it all goes well then.
So we know you've got a GoFundMe out there. So is there anything else you're doing alongside this GoFundMe to fund your karate journey, or are you slowly relying on kind of donations from your community there?
Well, what I'm hoping for is I'm trying to look for a sponsor to obviously help cover the costs, but at the moment the best we can do is GoFundMe.
Well, it's time for our final break, but after we've got plenty more. We'll be speaking to Kelly Milano, who is from Club Awesome. She'll be speaking about the first ever neurodivergent Barbie, which comes with autistic traits such as noise cancelling headphones. We'll also take a look at a Gravesend resident who spent the last 3 years collecting discarded shopping lists outside a number of supermarkets across Kent. And of course, you'll get your upcoming weather forecast for the next few days. All that and more after that short break, so we'll catch you later. Goodbye for now. Hello and welcome back to Kent Tonight live on KMTV. Now it's time to bring some sparkle to Medway as Mattel, the toy company famous for Barbie, has just released its first ever neurodivergent version of the character. The doll includes autistic traits such as noise-cancelling headphones, a side-eye gaze and a tablet for communication. Mattel says this Barbie is intended to allow more children with special educational needs to see themselves represented in the toy. And Kelly Milano from Club Awesome, a charity supporting autistic children in the 5 towns, joined us to talk more about this. So, Kelly, thank you for joining me here. So, tell us, first of all, what are your thoughts on this product? Do you think it completes its goal of inclusivity? And we can see it here, there.
No, I would say not. Autism doesn't have a look. It's an invisible disability. You know, several of the Barbies could all be autistic and they all look completely different. You know, not all children or adults wear ear defenders. In fact, I would say most of my teenage girls that attend are never going to wear ear defenders because they're too frightened to stand out from the crowd. I think it's very, very stereotypical, you know. If we're going to be stereotypical, Barbie's probably always been autistic, you know, from the very first moment 100 years ago. She's always walked tiptoe, you know, so I could also judge that. I think it could have been done a little bit better. And
we've got the advert for it on screen now. So you mentioned that you yourself are concerned about some of the stereotypes. So what kind of choices do you think, in your opinion, aren't the best ones?
She's wearing a dress. You know, I would say should have been much better off if she'd had a hoodie on and some loose clothing. You know, it's a little bit unpredictable to have bare legs when you're autistic. The cold weather, the warm weather, you don't know how it's going to feel. It's a little bit unpredictable. Children like to know, and adults on the spectrum like to know that everything's going to be safe and the same, you know, without any worries. Looks like a calculator in her hands, doesn't it? It doesn't really look like a communication tool. She's got a fidget spinner, and she's got very straight, brushed hair. Lots of young people on the spectrum really struggle with sensory issues with their hair, so I think it could have been done a lot better.
So you mentioned there that autism doesn't have a look, and yet you've pointed out some bits and pieces there that you would change on this doll. So what kind of aspects would you have done differently if you were kind of, you know, working at Mattel, working on that one?
I'd probably have done an accessory pack so that any Barbie, any Ken, any doll, any action figure could just go and buy the accessory pack and put it on any doll. I could line probably, you know, 100 of my children up at Club Awesome and they'd all look different. So if humans, we look different, it'll be good to have representation across the board.
So this is not something that you feel you'd want to bring into Club Awesome, and why would that be?
If children want to come along and bring it in and play with it, I'm sure there's lots of little girls that would love it. And I know little girls that are eager and they've bought the doll and they're ready to pick it up. But I'd rather every child was seen for the individual that they are and every adult.
I see, and do you think this could also, we spoke about children there, but you think adults might have similar views of what you said?
Absolutely. So I've asked lots and lots of people over the last couple of days, and the opinions, you know, not many people like it. It's very, you know, stereotyping is difficult because people with autism are already judged already. They're already having a tough time with people think that, you know, it's an invisible disability. You know, inclusion's great, but not at the detriment of stereotype. It could be quite damaging, quite dangerous.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for coming on and sharing that insight there. Next, the iconic Guildhall in Faversham is due for a £300,000 renovation. The town centre, which dates back to 1572, is set to undergo a transformation in April 2027. Built during the reign of Elizabeth I, the building was converted from a market hall into the Guildhall in 1605. A recent survey has revealed problems with the building, from the roofs and external elevations to the windows. The building is expected to remain open for the duration of the project, continuing to host events such as town meetings, markets and gatherings. Now, don't forget you can keep up to date with all the latest headlines by visiting kmtv.co.uk, where you'll find all our most recent stories, including this one about a snooker centre in Tunbridge Wells putting out a campaign to save their building.
To some, snooker might seem like a simple game, but actually it's far more skillful and complicated than people give it credit for. And just like the game itself, one Tunbridge Wells snooker centre are trying to prove that there's more than meets the eye when it comes to their venue. The Victoria Snooker Centre could be demolished as part of redevelopment plans to the nearby Royal Victoria Place shopping centre, but locals to the snooker hall aren't happy. They've started a campaign that's now at more than 1,600 signatures to try and change the council's mind about the hall, which has a long legacy of hosting famous players and exhibition matches. But it's the local community that's said to be the best part of the Victoria Snooker Centre.
It's a second/third home for some people. The community hub that we've created are based around a lot of the leagues we've created as well. So we run a lot of our in-house leagues, which has created a social circle of 100, 150 people playing with people they never thought they would play with.
While many consider snooker a classic pub game, it's actually quite a specialist sport that needs a certain level of maintenance, space and cost to set up, which is why the centre's owners say they don't want locals to lose the Victoria.
We do see a lot of snooker clubs disappearing, and we don't want to be one of those. We do see some of them are just turning into sort of sports and social clubs, putting probably more pool tables in, which is not a problem. But in general, you know, the general consensus of where we are is snooker, and we want to keep this as much of a snooker club as we can.
Now, if you looked around and thought this old hall is more suited to royalty than snooker, you'd actually only be half right. And that's because this hall has hosted some of the greats of the snooker world. Mark Selby, Ronnie O'Sullivan and Jimmy White, to name a few. And it's that legacy that the members and owners are trying to protect here.
I was just outraged, really. This club is a thriving family business. It's been here for 30 years. And under the new owners, it's done really well, especially after lockdown, because, you know, I think I'm not the only person who thought that actually I don't want my whole life to just be work and looking at my phone. I wanted something more from life and kind of a community.
A Tunbridge Wells Borough Council spokesperson said all feedback will be carefully reviewed before finalising the proposals. The council is in regular contact with the owner and their representatives, and a planning application is expected to be submitted around Easter 2026. For Martin, Liam and the 400-odd members of the club, they hope a compromise can be found soon so they can stay in the hall, keep the tables open and the lights on. Finn McDermott for KMTV in Tunbridge Wells.
Now, the Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning tomorrow for some areas in Kent, including Maidstone, Tunbridge Wells, Tonbridge, Ashford and Folkestone. Rain is expected to be heavy all day, and with warnings about road flooding, and delays to public transport. A Met Office spokesperson has advised people across Kent to check their properties for flooding and even prepare for potential power cuts. And on that note, let's take a look at the weather in finer details. The weather tonight will be slightly warmer, highs of 10 in Canterbury, lows around 9. Skies relatively clear, although some cloud across the board. By tomorrow morning, heavy rain expected with a yellow weather warning in place. Temperatures dipping slightly, lows of 8 degrees. Through the afternoon, temperatures remaining about the same. Rain likely to continue throughout the day, highs of 9 degrees. And here is your outlook for the rest of the week. Thursday, nice and rainy there, 10 degrees, brightening up on Friday with 9 degrees, and Saturday, overcast and cloudy at 9 degrees, so not too cold there. And finally, how many times have you lost your shopping list? Well, Kieran Poole from Gravesend has spent the past 3 years picking out discarded notes outside supermarkets across Kent. What began as a frustration with littering has grown into an art project and now an exhibition, featuring more than 1,000 recovered lists. There's even a chance your own missing list could have found a second life, now on display in Rochester. And Maisie Walker caught up with him to find out more.
An artist from Gravesend has spent the past 3 years picking up discarded notes and shopping lists outside supermarkets across Kent.
What started as a hatred for littering has turned into an art exhibition in Rochester, featuring more than 1,000 shopping lists.
For the artist, Kieran, the project is about slowing down and paying attention to things most people ignore, while also encouraging people to think about the impact of littering.
I think it's because of storytelling, right? So like, I love telling stories. I have a background in journalism, I have a background in comedy, and that's all about storytelling. So I think I must have found that list and thought, oh, that could be interesting sometime. And then I must have gone back to a supermarket and found another, and it just kept happening. Now I've got 1,000. I can't remember a specific moment where I was like, I can make art out of this. Absolutely not. Listen, these have all been littered, okay? So like, it's the idea that maybe let's think about litter, but then of course if no one litters, I don't have an exhibition. But But also I think it's the fact that the inane objects that we have can tell stories, right? So any words put in any order, whether it's milk, eggs, bread, cereal, they tell a story. And I think any words put together tell a story.
There are around 200 lists displayed here at Holtburn Pop Gallery in Rochester, with each one accompanied by a short story inspired by what was found.
I think this is a first, to have something that is, I guess, more text-based. The focus is very much on the writing, and also it's kind of display of artifact in a way. From that kind of perspective, it's almost like an archive-y collection of these objects. So whereas usually it will be, paintings or something.
Kieran will also be doing one-man shows, telling the stories of the shopping lists in February at Margate and Rochester. From supermarket pavements to gallery walls, these forgotten lists have found a second life, encouraging people to pause, look again, and reconsider what we so often throw away. Maisie Walker for KMTV, Rochester.